Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is AJ Stevens. I am the program supervisor. Depending on how things go, we may or may not be joined by Kelly Russell, our assistant director, and Michael Knight, our fiscal and contracting supervisor. Also with me, we have Nathan Graham, senior program coordinator, and Giselle Betances, program coordinator. So everyone is aware this session is going to be recorded. At any point, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat and we will answer either during the dedicated question section, or if it's particularly pertinent, we might stop and answer it. There will also be a couple points where you can raise your hand and come off mute to ask your questions out loud. So, who are we and why are we here? We are the Office of Management and Budget Community Development Division. You may know us as the people who make you fill out lots of paperwork to get grants. You are organizations which have provisionally been awarded either a 2025 public service or neighborhood economic development grant. Of course, these funds are federal money, so there are lots of rules and regulations, which is why we have these training sessions, why your program coordinators will work with you. We just want to try and make things go as smoothly as possible. Today, we're going to talk about what CDBG is, how it works, how we make a contract, and most excitingly, how you get the funds. CDBG is the Community Development Block Grant, which just means that is a chunk of money the city gets. It is designated for low and moderate income residents, and we distribute it to nonprofits such as the ones you represent via our public service and neighborhood economic development grants. If you have been following the budget discussions, it's in there as CDBG. But since our PSG and NED programs are funded with CDBG, we have to follow all of these lovely federal regulations. So every year, HUD issues funds directly to the city of Pittsburgh. Right now, as has been mentioned in the emails you've received, we don't officially have our money yet. It's coming. We're expecting it. There's just been a lot of holdups with the government shutdown. So since we don't have the money, we cannot officially promise it to you, which is why we keep saying provisional. However, once we get the money, we allocate the funds to organizations within the city, and these organizations are called subrecipients. That's you guys. So you may recall, you all applied. City Council and the mayor made funding decisions. Our office determined eligibility before they made those decisions to just making sure everyone checked all of the boxes as an organization. So you will be receiving an award letter as soon as we are allowed to send award letters. What you will be receiving for sure, though, is an email from your program coordinator that will contain all of the information, all of the documents you need to start creating a contract. Once your contract is executed, you carry out your activities and submit invoices, and then the city controller writes a check for the invoice amount once it's approved. As a reminder, this is a reimbursement grant. You have to spend the money to get the money. And those little stars are just where we are in the process. Okay, so as I mentioned, during the application process, we confirmed your eligibility as an organization, but it is your responsibility as an awardee to maintain that eligibility throughout the contract term. The biggest things are your SAM.gov registration. That active registration has to be renewed every year. So just because you had it last year does not mean you still have it. Please keep an eye on that. It has a very handy expiration date, and you can always ask your program coordinators for help. Additionally, general liability insurance is required for all organizations. Workers' comp insurance is required for any organizations with paid staff. Those insurance policies must cover your organization for the entire contract term. If your insurance expires, just send us a new updated policy certificate. It is also required that you maintain your 501c3 status throughout the course of the contract term. Now, these emails that you're going to get from your program coordinators will contain all of this information, but we like to go over just The documents that you're going to be turning in to make your contract. So first up is the exhibit. First up is there's going to be all of these exhibits. They will be, there will be a checklist as well. So first up is your scope. This describes how funds will be spent, specifically saying CDBG funds will be used for. And then if you are a project that is serving seniors or the homeless, you will mention which presumed benefit population you're serving. If you are verifying income of your beneficiaries, you will have a section that mentions how you verify beneficiary income. And if you are doing a NED project, you will mention which census tract or tracts your project will operate in. For the first two, the presumed benefit and the income verification, you will also mention an estimated number of people you will serve with these funds. Again, your coordinator and checklist will have these details. Exhibit B is your budget. It must be tied to the scope. It must include only approvable expenses. There will be more on that later. And the budget must include the exact award amount. We do not want the budget for your entire organization. We just need to know how you're going to spend your award exactly. Exhibit C is where we put the insurance. You must have that $1 million in general liability insurance. And your certificate of insurance must include the phrase, City of Pittsburgh is an additional insured in terms of general liability insurance. If we don't have that, we will reject the certificate and ask you to send a new one. Again, you have to have that proof of insurance for the entire contract. Just make a note of when your policy expires and plan to send an updated certificate of insurance over to your coordinator. If your organization has paid staff, you need to provide proof of workers' comp insurance. If you do not have paid staff, be sure to let your program coordinator know that, and they will give you a waiver that you have to sign to that effect. And again, if you have that workers' comp insurance, it needs to cover the entire term of the contract. The debarment certificate, we mostly include that here so you don't wonder why we're going from C to E. The debarment certificate will be signed electronically in the contract with the rest of the contract, and it is a statement promising that your organization is legally permitted to do business with the city. Exhibit E is your statement of affiliations. So there are some questions we encourage you to answer briefly. You do have to, however, include your entire board of directors. We need their name, title, and contact information. If it doesn't fit in the final box, just add it as an extra page. We need that information. You will also receive a federal grant reporting form. This is any federal dollars that you have spent in the last fiscal year. This includes CDBG funds from the city. So if you got a public service or a NED grant last year, please include that on your federal grant reporting form. Finally, we need the contact information for the person who will sign the contract. We need their name, title, and email address so that we can enter them into our electronic signature process. And this person must be authorized to sign on behalf of the organization, but it can be your board president, your chief operating officer, an administrative secretary, anyone who is authorized to sign on behalf of the organization. So, of course, why does this matter? Because once that contract is executed, it is legally binding. You will need to spend the money according to the budget that you put in the contract. You will need to request your invoices during the time frame set out in the contract. You will need to be reporting on your beneficiaries as is delineated in the contract. So some of these are simple attachments and some of them require a little bit more work. You can always ask your coordinator if you need help with any of them. And at the end, we will have a link to a page on our website that has examples of all of them. And those examples will be going out in those emails from your program coordinator. We are asking that you put your documents in by January 16th. We know that the holidays are coming up, but January 16th, everybody should be back in their regular rhythm by then. Try and get all of your documents in as quickly as possible, because the sooner you get your contract executed, the sooner you can request this money and get a check. I will now pass it over to Nathan.
Hello, everyone. I want to start with a quote from HUD. The cardinal rule of federal funds is, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So with that in mind, why are we documenting? And that's because every organization receiving funds is subject to monitoring, the spooky, scary word that gets everyone scared, but in the end, it's not designed to trip you up. It's not punitive in any way. And if your organization is chosen, it's not because we think you're making mistakes. It's not because we think that you're a bad organization or that you deserve to be monitored. It really is that you just were chosen on some random basis. And your program coordinator will warn you in advance if this is happening. It could happen during the term of your contract, but most likely will happen after your contract is closed. And it's for everyone. Everyone is going to go through this process, and we want you to pass. We want to be on the same page so that if HUD ever came to your organization, that we know that you're good, we know that we're good, and everyone will get flying colors and get gold stars.
We're going to take a quick break for questions right here. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand. While we are waiting on that, I do just want to say that the basis for monitoring is not random. There is a pattern to it based on what type of funding you're receiving. Will we be able to get a copy of this PowerPoint? Yes, we are going to send out a follow-up email that will have the slides, and then there will also be a link to the recording. One for additional questions. Okay, I am not seeing any. So again, you can still be typing your questions in the chat throughout, or we will have another time for questions at the end. And now we will pass it over to, what backup documentation will be needed for monitoring. So that is going to be something that is discussed through, like in the lead up to your monitoring. Your program coordinator will give you a checklist. But for now, make sure that you are keeping track of everything related to your contract in a specific place. So everything that your program coordinator sends you, everything that you send them, keep it all in a contract specific file. All right, over to our fiscal and contracting supervisor.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, it's money time. You learned what's all needed to develop a contract. Now it's time to turn that contract into reimbursable funds. Going back to the budget area where you discuss how you plan on spending your awards is really important. When creating that budget, you want to be as generic as possible. You don't want to be very specific in your wording, and we're going to go over some examples very shortly of what I mean, but just give a brief overview. Salaries, if you want to pay for an executive director, an admin, you don't need to have those specifically broken out in those categories. You can just say personnel. So before we move on to a deeper dive into being reimbursed, I just want to warn you, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. There will be a quiz at the end of this, but don't worry. If you don't retain everything, this is what we're here for, to help you get to the finish line and get access to your funds. So let the fun begin. What can get approved? That's a great question. So going back to what I said, budget line items that we are most commonly use, program supplies, personnel. Again, that's a catch-all for any staff member who is employed by the organization falls under personnel. So you can mix and match if the individual's working on the program, you can mix and match opposed to specifically identifying specific people. Rent, professional service, scholarships. These are the type of line items that we want to look for. If you're buying supplies, we don't need a line item that says Target or Walmart or Home Depot. Program supplies, utilities, we don't need to be broken out, gas, water, utilities, it's a catch-all. It will make your life easier to move through this process if you follow this, but if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to your program coordinator who can give you guidance. Discussing some of the line items, in particular, professional service or supply expenses, a procurement process. If you are utilizing the service or purchasing an item that exceeds $5,000, you need to make sure first you have a procurement policy as an organization, but second, that you followed that procurement policy in order to obtain the services or goods that you're asking to be reimbursed for. And just if you're not exactly sure what we mean by procurement policy, the last line item on the slide is, for example, if you're looking for a tax accountant, go out and vet or request 3, 4, 5 different quotes from different agencies or businesses who can provide that service. And then from there, you can make the selection. That way it shows that you didn't just hire a friend or a relative to utilize these funds to pay to do the service. It shows that you did a proper, fair assessment to make your decision. So again, any questions in that area, don't hesitate to reach out. So, ineligible expenses. This is a very important topic because if it's ineligible for us, we cannot reimburse it. So just understand, these rules come straight from HUD. There's no wiggle room. Just because we can't reimburse you for some of these items doesn't mean that you still can't do it. We're not telling you how to run your programs or how to operate. It's just we're telling you what can and cannot be reimbursed. Looking at this list, I'll just touch base on a couple of them. Food, drinks, snacks, etc. If your organization is not a designated food distributor, such as a food bank or a food pantry, we cannot reimburse you for food. If you run an after school program and you feed the kids, that's great. We just can't reimburse for that. Swag, when we talk about swag, tote bags, t-shirts, again, great things to hand out for marketing aspects and provide branding. It's not a true benefit to HUD in HUD's eyes, so we cannot reimburse that. Award ceremonies, events, again, not reimbursable with these HUD funds. And again, what's creating these to not be reimbursable? There's not a real benefit in the eyes of HUD that these funds should be used in that manner. There are other items, but again, if you have anything questionable that you're looking for to create a budget for, myself and or the coordinators will be able to help guide you through this process. So now that you understand how to create your budget, what type of line items are allowable, what type of line items are ineligible, how do I get reimbursed? So this year, So this year, we will begin a new submission and reimburse process. Everything will be submitted through Bridgeway. A lot of you all are already familiar with Bridgeway because that's the software that you use to fill out the application. Now a centralized area for applications, submissions, and updates as to when payments are going to be made or have been made to your contract. So again, this is where you'll be doing the submissions. We will have a demonstration as to how the system works for submitting, but that will be TBD, to be determined. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're making this process very streamlined and simple for each and every one of you all to fully expend these funds and reap the benefits of this award. We won't be requiring requisitions as we have in the past. This system will be now the new process for requisitions. So let's take another step forward in the invoicing. With the system, we still are going to require pretty much the same information that any individual was used to submit in years prior. As I said, there will be no requisition cover sheet. Bridgeway replaces that. We will still need a narrative. We will still need proof of expenses or backup documentation for what you're asking to be reimbursed for. And then again, the beneficiary report letting us know how many individuals were serviced. Again, invoicing can be done on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. You don't have to request funds multiple times. If you can expend all your funds with one request, one and dones are always best. But at the very least, we need you to submit a reimbursement request at least once a quarter from the time your contract has been executed, if not monthly. So going back to what we are looking for when it comes to acceptable documentation for your request. So if you're doing personnel, it is very important that you understand we do need a copy of a timesheet with two signatures, the employee's signature and a supervisor's signature. To take it one step higher, because we do reimburse for some executive directors, if an executive director if it's their timesheet, then they will need a board member to sign off on a timesheet to complete that process. Along with timesheets, we need a copy of a pay stub and or a payroll detail report. To circle back real quick regarding timesheets, if the employee is not spending 100% of their time on the program within a calendar day, we must see how many hours was spent on the program. So for example, today, if I'm working on multiple programs and this CDBG grant program is one of them, and I've only spent 2 hours working on it, we need to see that line item on the timesheet. December 3rd, I worked 8 to 4, but out of those 8 hours, I only had 2 hours of CDBG program work. So it's very important that you document out the number of hours for your employee if they're not spending 100% of their time on the program within the reimbursable time period. Next, utilities. Again, please make sure when you submit utilities, you submit the full invoice. Sometimes we'll get utility bills that may have a previous balance with a current balance that equals a total balance. We cannot reimburse that total balance. Any prior or late fees will be deducted. We will only be reimbursing current charges. Now, if you have that previous invoice that bill rolled over to, you are more than welcome to submit that invoice as long as it falls within the term of your contract. Same just to jump ahead a little bit, supplies. We need to see receipts. And whenever we're looking at receipts, we understand that over time, sometimes receipts fade, get a little tattered. If you have trouble reading what the itemized items were purchased, we're going to have trouble reading it, and we will not be able to reimburse for unreadable receipts. If you try to handwrite over it to do any corrections, that will be not unallowable too. So just try to do your best to either make copies or take a picture of the receipt in due time. That way it's clear and it shows who it's from, what was purchased, the date, and the total cost. So with all that information that I just poured on to you, as I said in the beginning, it's time to take a quiz.
Before we jump into the quiz, there's a couple questions that I want to cover in the chat so they don't get lost. The first was the difference between the rules and guidelines on the ineligible expense slide. So rules are things that are explicitly laid out in HUD regulations as ineligible. Guidelines are things that are almost always disproved. They're the sorts of things that you can ask, but the answer is 99% of the time no. So honorariums and stipends are not eligible. Incentives, this is the next question, incentives are not reimbursable. You can kind of think of it as anything that looks like money going home in someone's pocket is not an eligible expense. We then have a question about a clock-in system rather than time cards. So, which are, payroll reviewed by the director of finance and the kitchen team. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a time card, but you should be able to still pull a report from that clock-in system that shows the hours worked. We do still need signatures on those, but your clock-in system should be able to provide some sort of report that is sufficient.
Take it back.
Mhm.
And just to go with electronic timesheets, even if there's something that may say like it's been approved by whoever a supervisor is, that would be suffice to, if signatures can't be obtained, but we just need to see approval on those electronic timesheets too.
Next question, would the manager's signature suffice or would we need each employee to sign?
We would need each employee to sign unless that employee is no longer employed. Like for whatever reason, if it's skipped by, these timesheets should be signed in current time, but for whatever reason, if an employee is no longer there and it's their final timesheet, then supervisor or manager signature will be suffice. But outside of that scenario, it should have two signatures.
All right. Our employees do not sign their electronic timesheets. There is no way to do that in our system. It just shows electronic approval by supervisors.
Sure, that's fine. As long as we know who the supervisor's name is. I mean, if you want to send over a copy of it, just to get the A-OK, but 9 times out of 10, it will be okay.
We have also seen people just do a printout of that and sign it physically.
Yeah.
All right. So we have thrown a lot of information at you, and now it's time to test it. We're going to do a little quiz. Please feel free to put your answers in the chat. And all of this serves to kind of help you remember what's ineligible and eligible expenses, as we want to make sure you feel confident and comfortable for the year ahead. But as always, if you have any questions or concerns, here is a great time to ask these questions. As well as always feel free to ask your program coordinators, as we will be there every step of the way and kind of serve as a touch point for any questions that might come up. So question number 1, is this an eligible expense? Canned goods for a food pantry. Now, please feel free to put it in the chat. Great job, guys. So as we get a general idea from the chat, you are correct. This would be an eligible expense because it is for a food pantry. Next up is lunch for volunteers at a cleanup eligible.
I think repeat that question. It looks like something.
Yeah.
went for a second.
1 second, let me just repeat that real quick. Is this an eligible expense? Lunch for volunteers at a community cleanup? Please feel free to put it into the chat. So I feel like the general consensus in the chat is no, and you are correct. Lunch for volunteers at a community cleanup is not eligible. Let's try another question. Salary and benefits. Is this an eligible expense? So for this, bonus points for those who said yes with eligible and proper documentation. So acceptable proof of this would be pay stubs and timesheets. I see in the chat someone's audio cut out. Can someone let me know what the yes and no's are in regard to? Of course, Jordan. So right now we are asking the question, are salary and benefits an acceptable or eligible expense? And the group has decided that yes. Well, the correct answer is yes. And we gave special point out for people who said with the correct documentation. That correct documentation looks like pay stubs and timesheets.
Although I will say that all of your eligible expenses do require required documentation.
Correct. Okay, up next, is this an eligible expense? A new computer for your office staff?
Mixed replies.
Yeah, it seems like we are debating the two in the chat. So, as you, some of you have pointed out, a new computer for your office staff is not eligible for CDBG funds.
So there are some relevant questions. This is because it would be used by your staff. And there's no real way for us to confirm that you're using this computer only for CD eligible purposes. Because even if you're continuing to use it for eligible purposes after the grant, if it's still purchased with the grant, then we want to know who's benefiting. So basically, the only time that you might be able to get something like a new computer would be if you're an employment center and you're getting a computer for your beneficiaries to use to apply for jobs. Generally, if it's something big, a big piece of equipment for your office staff, the answer is no.
So now let's go on to insurance for your organization. Is this an eligible expense? So it seems like there's a bit of a, what do you call it, contention in the chat of whether yes or no, but actually insurance is very much accepted. For acceptable proof, we just simply ask an invoice from your insurance company and a copy of the policy showing the term. Now, what is the date by which you should submit your contract documents?
We got this one.
Now, this one, I feel like we're all pretty confident it is correct, January 16th. However, you do not have to wait until the absolute last day to submit these documents. We definitely accept them, and as soon as possible is always a great kind of option as well. So this is the absolute last date, so you don't have to wait until then to submit your documents.
Going to take questions again. There were a couple more in the chat. One was asking to define scholarships, which that would be if you are running a program like a summer camp and there is a cost to participate in the summer camp, but for some income eligible students, that cost is covered. That's a scholarship. If you are doing something very specific with scholarships with your program, you can discuss it further with your program coordinator, as that will, sometimes if you're calling it something different, we might have to look into it a little further, but generally a scholarship is going to be a cost to participate in a program. We also had a question about how to record time for exempt employees since they don't do timesheets.
We have a manual time sheet that you can utilize to do it, but a time sheet would have to be, even if they're salary or exempt. For HUD's requirement, a time sheet would have to be submitted. If you need a sample time sheet to do in place, we can provide that to you.
So the next question is, if we're being asked to submit documents by January 16th, does that mean we're moving past the provisionally selected phase to awarded? Technically not yet. I have mentioned we cannot officially award you the funds until we have them. They should be on their way to the city from HUD, but until we have those funds, we are not allowed to officially promise you these funds. We are just moving forward because this is a lot of paperwork to get through, and we want to be ready to hit the ground running as soon as that money is in our bank account. Okay, how do we show that costs are only spent on eligible participants if we have participants that are not low income?
So again, the individuals that are eligible, we'll just use a percentage. So if you have 7 eligible individuals out of 10, whatever the cost is, we would only reimburse 70% of the cost that you are asking to be reimbursed for. But you will have to, again, have documentation supporting which individuals were eligible versus ineligible.
All right, do we have any further questions? Still confused about the signatures needed for interns. Yes, so this might end up being something that is better to discuss with your program coordinator. Once you get in touch with them, you can send them over what you have and we can look it over, because I think just trying to get a description across might not be the best use of everyone's time, okay? Okay. Also, I do keep saying, once your program coordinators contact you, because of how scheduling is, some of you are going to be receiving the emails this week and some next week, but you will have them by mid next week. Your coordinator is going to reach out to you. Also, in the follow-up email to this training and yesterday's training, we will include instructions of, if you have not heard from your program coordinator by next Wednesday, please email community.development@pittsburghpa.gov so we can make sure that we're following up. Will there be a process for checking eligibility, and will that information have to be submitted for each participant? There will be a process for checking eligibility. If you look at your application, you should have listed how you intend to do that in the application. The subrecipients are responsible for ensuring eligibility of their participants. The city does not want any personally identifying information, but we will need the race, ethnicity, and income data that the beneficiary report requires. And the beneficiary report can be found on our resources for subrecipients page, which is this last bullet point here. We have a variety of eligibility verification methods that are acceptable. The most common is our nonprofits check if the beneficiary is enrolled in any federal aid programs like SNAP, TANF, housing assistance, anything like that. If they're eligible for a federal program, they are eligible for our CD programs. If you are doing a youth program, we have a great partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools, and they can give you a percentage of how many of the kids in your program are on free or reduced lunch. And if they're eligible for that income wise, then they're eligible for our programs. So I already mentioned the bottom bullet on this slide, our resources for subrecipients page. It's got all of the documents, examples of all of the exhibits, everything that you'll need for submitting a requisition further down the line. Starting back at the top of the list, your main resource is your program coordinator. We love questions. We are so happy to hear from you all of the time. We would much rather you just ask the question than if you find yourself going down a research rabbit hole, just reach out. That's what we're here for. You will receive a contract checklist that is going to list all of the documents that you have to submit and a little bit of information about all of them. We also have a link to this this manual called Playing by the Rules for Subrecipients. If you'll recall, you as a nonprofit are going to be a subrecipient. This manual is very large and covers a whole lot of situations, but if you need to look into what the federal regulations are saying about how to follow the rules, this manual is going to have the answer. We also have HUD Exchange, which is a website run by HUD, and that is a great place to find further information about the grant program, potentially uses for it, and all kinds of additional things. And we just got a very kind shout out about Nathan being very quick to answer questions. Do we have any additional questions? We can, again, raise hands, put them in the chat. There will be a follow-up email going out, potentially not until tomorrow, depending on how long the recording takes to get situated. But you will receive that, and you will receive contact from your program coordinator by mid next week. Otherwise, we will go ahead and cut this session. The city staff will stay on for another couple minutes in case anybody wants to stick around and ask a further question. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming to this presentation, and thank you for all of the great work you're doing to help our city and our residents. All right, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, so we're going to go ahead and end the event. Thank you all for your attendance.